this thing. Verse 8, howbeit then, when ye knew not God, ye did service to them which by nature are no gods. But now, after you have known God, or rather have known of God, how turn ye again to the weak and beggarly elements whereunto ye desire again to be in bondage? Ye observe days and months and times and years. I'm afraid of you, lest I have bestowed upon you labor in vain. Wow, that's salvational. His labor was to preach them salvation. Paul didn't keep the feasts of the no-gods. Paul kept the feasts of Yahweh, as we've seen, like Passover, unleavened bread, Pentecost, and the Day of Atonement. These were Paul's things, but there is no mention ever of Paul keeping the feast of the no-gods. Oh no, not even once. Now the text sees the Galatians turning back to the beggarly elements associated with pagan holidays. You can just imagine what they were. In fact, your mind will be cleaner if you don't. But they were keeping the pagan holidays such as those of Astarte or Mithra, supposed birth date of December 25, and so on. Perhaps you can remember how the Ephesians cried out, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians," for 2 hours, because they were all upset about Paul's teachings against idolatry. Diana of Ephesus. Diana's name can be traced to Astarte. Astarte. By the way, Astarte is the name from which we get Easter. Once again, December 25 was also honored across Asia Minor, right where Paul was preaching. Notice, December 25, quote, the pagans honored it as the birthday of Mithra, later adopted into Rome, and finally solidified by the Emperor Aurelian. You see, the Apostle Paul really faced 2 problems. 2 troublesome influences were creeping into the church. One was a strong Jewish element, insisting on the right of circumcision for all adult Gentile males should they join the faith. Well, you can imagine what a problem that would be with very limited anesthetics and no antibiotics and so forth. The other problem was with the Gentiles continuing in their involvement with old pagan holidays. I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever how Paul would react to the clever way that certain compromising church leaders took the pagan holidays and simply Christianized them by giving them Christian names, so that the pagans coming into the church would feel comfortable with the same holidays. Thus, their observance continues to this very day. Notice the origin of modern holy days. Coming up on the screen, I have a few. Easter. The egg became one of the symbols of Astarte, or Easter, as she's now called. You can see the occult meaning of the mystic egg of Astarte in the book The Two Babylons, page 109, by Alexander Hislop. Christmas, on the other hand, most of you know where that comes from. A lot of us just have liked to block it out of our mind. But from Chambers' Encyclopedia, page 538, at Rome, a pagan festival of the Nativity of Sol Invictus was introduced by the Emperor Aurelian on the 25th of December. Now notice, the church, unable to stamp out this popular festival, spiritualized it. Yes, really it was a festival to the sun god, which has been spirited and now called a Mass for Christ, or Christ Mass. Lent, on the other hand, the 40-day celebration was observed by the Yazidis, pagan devil worshippers of Kurdistan, who inherited it from the Babylonians. Sunday, the day of the sun, was considered by Mithraists as a sacred day of rest. Sunday observance is of pagan origin. Most of you who have studied the Sabbath know that anyway. I don't mean to be too repetitious, but I want you to see in Galatia how Paul was facing these things head on. Now, in this final generation, with all our library and computer references to church history, we're privileged to see our way clear on these things if we want to. Numerous books on ancient pagan holiday trace their roots from ancient Babylon to the worship of Semiramis, Tammuz, Nimrod, and so on, all gods of sun worship. I want you to notice this next idea taken from Richard Melody Drake's book entitled God's Holidays. They write, quote, "Many Christians believe that celebrating Christmas is a harmless celebration because most have forgotten that it was originally a pagan holiday. But how would you feel if someone murdered your son, became your arch enemy? Later your family tells you, but that's okay. In fact, from now on, we're going to celebrate your son's birthday on the birth date of the one who murdered him." How would you feel about that if you were the father? Would you really feel like joining in? I think not. Now, just a moment. Can you see religious leaders of the past standing in judgment, having taught that such skullduggery was instigated by our king? Can you see the King of Heaven leaning forward from his throne and saying, "You said I said what?" On page 143 of the same book, it says, "By making December 25 the birthday of Christ, we're combining the holy with the profane, the unclean with the clean, which is expressly forbidden in the Scripture." I want you to notice one text on this fact that kind of backs that up. This is Ezekiel 22, verse 26. "Her priests have violated my law and have profaned mine holy things. They have put no difference between the holy and the profane, neither have they showed difference between the unclean and the clean, and have hid their eyes from my Sabbaths, and I am profaned among them." Can you imagine that God's people, Israel, were profaning His Sabbaths by putting no difference between them and something else? Wow. Writing to folk who today keep the holy seventh-day Sabbath, the author of the same book, God's Holidays, asked, if we throw out Sunday on the basis that it's a baptized pagan holiday, which it surely is, then aren't we hypocritical if we continue to celebrate Christmas? And I might add any other baptized holiday as well. Well, friends, I've given you some pretty heavy things to think about. You might not want to learn any more. I don't know. Actually, from the beginning, the introduction, we're into the fifth tape, called tape number 4. You've got a tremendous amount of information behind you. But let me tell you, after break, we're just getting started. Let's take a break now. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're going to be getting into more things right away. But first I want to say, if you really want to get into that old-time religion, that is the religion of the patriarchs and the prophets and the apostles and those of early church history, then you're obviously going to have to make some changes. And sometimes those changes are not appreciated by the folk around us or even religious leadership. Ellen White, in her book Great Controversy, page 596 and 597, wrote profusely about religious tyranny demonstrated by religious leaders of the Dark Ages, and then adds that you and I are going to have to expect some of the same. Isn't that a shame? But notice the quotation. "The spirit which actuated those priests and rulers is still manifested by many who make a high profession of piety. They refuse to examine the testimony of the Scriptures concerning the special truths for this time. They point to their own numbers, wealth, popularity, and look with contempt upon the advocates of truth as few